top 5 players to buy in FPL for game week 10. Today, I'm going to be taking you through my top transfer targets that I would be considering buying into my own team, that I think you should be buying into your teams as well. What is up everyone, FPL Harry here and welcome back to another video. Today it is my top players to buy going into game week 10. Those of you on wildcard, we've already reviewed a wildcard draft, so go and check that out if you haven't watched that already. But those of you not on wildcard, just thinking what players should you be prioritizing buying into your team, that is what we're going to have a look at during today's video. 1,000 likes on the video is always the aim. Subscribe if you are new around here as well. These videos, all the data is very kindly being sponsored by Fantasy Football Scout. This season, do check them out. It's the best one-stop shop for all things you need FPL. It's where I get all the data, the fixture tickers for all the players when I'm making my decisions as well. We're going to start off with a couple of more obvious picks. We won't spend loads of time on them and then we'll get down in ownership towards the end of the list. Number one, it is Mo Salah. For me, he's one of the most essential players in FPL at the moment. He's up to 12.7 million. He is flying. He is one of the biggest captaincy shouts every single week at the moment. But there are still 2 and 3 of you watching this video who don't own Mo Salah. And I do think going into game week 10, we will see his ownership rise even more to over 100% effective ownership, which means the average person will own him and captain him as well. So I do think now is a good time to be buying into him if you have not done already. The fixtures do continue to be good all the way up until about game week 16 or so. So you don't feel like you've missed the boat just because he scored points over the past couple of game weeks. 7 goals, 4 assists for Mo Salah so far this season. He has got a couple from penalties, so his XG per 90 is a little bit inflated as a result compared to his open play data, but I still think he's very focal to what Liverpool are doing. Because they're not in the Champions League as well, he often gets a little bit of a rest midweek, which is definitely helping to boost his output so far this season. So 12.7 million, if you don't have him, it's still time to buy him. The second player and the other obvious player we have on this list is Ollie Watkins. For me, there was no forward I'd consider buying into my team this week that isn't Ollie Watkins. He's up to 8.3 million. He's up to 34% owned, but the fixtures still continue to look good. They have Luton, Forest, and then Fulham at home in the next 3, almost Bournemouth as well in their next 5. No player in FPL has more returns than Ollie Watkins, apart from Mo Salah and Erling Haaland, since Unai Emery has taken over at Aston Villa. Ollie Watkins is focal to what they are doing. He continues to get goals and assists. 5 goals, 8 assists so far this season from just 9 games. Now, I don't expect those two returns to continue at quite the level they are. He has massively outperformed his expected assists so far this season. His goals are quite in line with what we'd expect, but he has got more assists than we would expect him to, given the performance we've had so far this season. However, even if he reduces a little bit, given the fixtures to maybe 1 return a week, given these averaging sort of 1.5 returns every game week, I still think that is a great shout. He's averaged over 8 points per 90 minutes. He continues to be a good option, and he's now a captaincy decision as well. Luton at home, Fulham at home in 2 of the next 3 means we should be considering Ollie Watkins for captaincy, let alone just bringing him into our teams as well. And pick number 3, the return of Bukayo Saka. He has dropped from 8.7 down to 8.5 million, having risen to 8.7 earlier on the season. His ownership is still high because a lot of people who maybe played early on in the season and have lost engagement have kept Saka, whereas a lot of us who are engaged in FPL and check our teams every week, making a lot of transfers, have decided to sell him, and I do think it is time to be considering buying him back into our teams. They play Sheffield United this week, then it is Newcastle, but then from game week 12 onwards, you can see that the fixtures for Arsenal are really good. Now, you could look at another Arsenal midfielder for a little bit cheaper. You could go and buy the likes of Martinelli, but I'm still concerned with his rotation with Trossard on that left-hand side. Odegaard you could go and buy, but he's the same price as Saka. And if Kai Havertz does start, it means that Odegaard is a little bit deeper and he's not as good an option. Gabriel Jesus, we've also seen Nketiah get a decent amount of minutes even off the bench. So I do still think that Bukayo Saka is the best option to go with, even if he's on penalties or not, which is still up for debate. The underlying data for him is really, really strong. 0.75 expected returns per 90 minutes. And given he does play the majority of minutes, expected to return in 75% of games he plays is really good. And looking at that upcoming run of fixtures, I think it's time to get him back into our team. Next up is a player who was quite fortunate to return in game week 9, but a player I bought on my wildcard that I'm so happy I've got, and that is Jarrod Bowen of West Ham, up to 7.4 million, still under 20% owned, and the West Ham fixtures now turn for the better. Everton, Forest, Burnley, Crystal Palace and Brentford all in their next 5. Jarrod Bowen is focal to what is going to happen at West Ham. If they're going to win games, as we saw against Aston Villa, even if they're not going to win, he is going to be the one that is getting goals. He is their main goal threat. 6 goals for him so far this season with 1 assist. Over 6 points per 90 minutes played so far this season. He is also very, very nailed. With some of the other teams like Brighton, maybe with your Liverpool assets, your Manchester United assets, your Man City assets, where there might be rotation in and around Europe, we're pretty certain that Bowen is going to play pretty much every single game that he can in the Premier League. 0.5 expected returns per 90 is really strong for him as well. Given those fixtures, I'm so happy he's in there. I cannot recommend you buying Jarrod Bowen enough. His price is only going to go up. Those fixtures look great. He's just get him in. Now, if you can afford Bowen, I would definitely own Bowen over a Brighton midfielder, but it is worth covering them because they do have a fantastic run of fixtures over the next 4 game weeks. Fulham, Everton, Sheffield United, Nottingham Forest in their next 4. It is the midfielders that I'm really looking at. Mitoma, Ansu Fati, and it was going to be Solly March on this graphic, but he has now picked up an injury, so Adingra is the one who is likely to fill his place and comes in at just 5 million. He is then offering a little bit of competition with the likes of Cole Palmer at Chelsea. Mitoma and Ansu Fati, both at 6.5, are probably more nailed than Adingra, although Adingra on that right-hand side doesn't really have that much competition if Solly March is going to be out. If you do have a cheap midfield slot, he is potentially worth taking a punt on. He has started 4 of the last 5. He might not be as good for returns, but he is likely to play a similar amount of minutes to the other 2 that we've got here. Mitoma and Ansu Fati, if I had to pick one and I had all the money in the world, I would buy Mitoma over Ansu Fati, who does have a little bit more rotation. He tends to be playing a lot of his minutes in that central number 10 role, where the likes of João Pedro does like to line up as well. So with Europa League, we do have a bit of a rotation issue for Ansu Fati. So Mitoma if you have the money, but if you need a cheap option, Adingra could be great for the next 4 fixtures. And the final option we have is cheap Liverpool defender Kostas Tsimikas, 4.5 million and currently just 3.6% owned. He has risen in price once already on Saturday and I expect him to continue to rise in price. Robertson is unlikely to play again between now and the end of the season, needing an operation on his shoulder after I think he dislocated it in his match last week. The fixtures for them going forward do look really good. In that 10-week period where Tsimikas is likely to play, they have some of the best fixtures, which is why we've considered buying Mo Salah into our team and we will be captaining him over that run. He did play 61 minutes in the game at the weekend, which is a little bit concerning, but he did get taken off for an attacker, so it was a little bit of a change in system, whereas if they play a normal game, I do expect him to continue to play maybe longer than that, and I wouldn't worry too much about the pre-60-minute subs. Those fixtures going forward are great. He's taken some set pieces. He's taken corners in that game he played as well. Online data is pretty, non-existent given he's only started 1 game so far this season. But it is times like this in FPL where you have to be able to be flexible and jump on new players who maybe weren't at options before. We've had it before with Tsimikas when Robertson's got injured, and I think this is the time again. So top 5 players to buy, from obvious high-owned players like Salah and Watkins to cheaper, less-owned differentials in the likes of Jarrod Bowen, Adingra at Brighton, and Kostas Tsimikas as well. Let me know if you're buying any of these into your team this week. Are you going Tsimikas? Are you going to take the risk on Brighton rotation? Bowen, for me, is the one. If you don't own and you need a midfielder, go and buy him this week. Thank you all so much for watching. 1,000 likes on the video is always the aim. Subscribe if you are new around here. Check out the link in the description if you want 30% off Fantasy Football Scout, where all of the data, fixture ticker, everything like that for these videos does come from. Thank you all for watching, and I'll be back again very soon.